All right, guys, we're back, and Kyla is back, our resident nutritionist, and today we're going to talk about the habits behind successful fueling. We know that fueling is critical to success on multiple factors, but today we want to try and give you some rules of thumb to help you be successful in the practice. So let's dive straight in. What do athletes need to think about when we actually start to create habits around fueling?
Yeah. So one of your habits should definitely be making sure you're getting in that recovery post-training session. Ideally, within 45 minutes of completion of the training session, higher in those protein and carbohydrates. And then making sure that the foods you're choosing are going to be whole foods, unprocessed foods, ideally.
My sort of reaction, what people often say is, yeah, that's great, but it's so much more convenient just to grab a chocolate milk or something like that. But in tendency, we want to sort of lean in towards real foods. Why is that?
Yeah, so the whole foods are going to give you more vitamins and minerals, obviously, than something from a package. I mean, some packages might add in some additional vitamins, but whole foods are going to give you more fiber. They're going to keep you feeling full longer. They're going to prevent that athletic starvation later in the day.
Post-workout fueling can often be a meal,
Yeah.
So it can actually be
breakfast,
lunch, or dinner, depending on where.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about planning, and you can say, it's a bit of a hassle to eat real foods. But ultimately, when you've got a time-starved life and you're very busy, there is a responsibility on the athlete to actually plan their week and what their responsibilities are with work and family, and then integrate training. I think a part of that process is adding to that equation, let's plan my nutrition and fueling so that I can be successful.
Right. Yeah. So doing some prep, getting together with your family on Sundays or something and prepping some food ahead of time can be really helpful.
But we've got 3 macronutrients. You've got carbohydrate, protein, and fat. What's the makeup? What should athletes be thinking globally of carbs, then protein, then fat, I guess?
So for our carbohydrates, we're really focusing on that for glycogen replenishment. Post our training session. That's the key factor.
What's glycogen?
Glycogen is going to be our storage form of carbohydrates.
Okay.
So we'll store that in our muscle. Every time our muscle contracts, we're going to be breaking down and utilizing the glycogen in there. So
that's perfect. Our energy packets.
Yes, exactly. Our quick energy packets. And then protein, that's going to aid in the muscle adaptation and repair from our training sessions as well. And then our fats are going to help pull in fat soluble vitamins, but they're also going to be the building blocks of some of our hormones like testosterone, for example.
Okay, perfect. And as a ratio of those, protein and carbohydrate, they're the parents, yeah. So in post-workout fueling, fat takes a little bit of a back seat.
Correct. Yeah. So the fats actually are going to impair the digestion and absorption of those protein and carbohydrates because it is a slower digester. It takes much longer to go process through the digestive system. So it will slow down those protein and carbs if you consume a lot of it with those 2 macronutrients.
Okay. So it takes a back seat in post-workout fueling. It takes a front seat in the rest of your daily eating.
Yeah.
Okay, that's super. So let's talk about, let's start to get a little bit more refined, because we have scenarios where you've got very high training load or very easy training load, and that's an extreme. So let's go with a high training load, and I'll give you a case study. I'm particularly nasty, and I give an athlete an Ironman simulator, and I say, you got to go out for 4.5 hours with race-specific intervals. And after that, you're going to run 45 minutes, mostly at race pace. That's a big sort of Saturday morning workout. So do the rules stay the same in that so far as post-workout fueling? It's not just a simple, there's your recovery meal, forget about it till dinner.
Right. Right. You're not going to consume that same meal you consumed after your hour swim that you had the days before, right?
Yeah.
So you still want to focus on that protein as your recovery, 20 to 30 grams minimum, right? And then shooting for, your carb allotment is going to be much higher for something like that compared to, an hour swim in the morning or something like that.
Okay.
So it's going to be the big change there.
So the carbohydrate becomes in many ways the main feature, or at least a really predominant role. And you're still choosing, it's not that you're saying, okay, it's 2 portions of fries, thank you very much. Yeah, you're still looking to come from a full source, but it is starchy carbohydrates. It's not a salad, is it? It's not vegetables.
Yeah,
you need something with substance.
It would be hard to get all the carbohydrates you need from a salad. You can definitely have a salad on the side if you'd like to get your veggies in. But going for something like quinoa, amaranth, sweet potato, russet potatoes, those things are fine at that time period to get those types of carbohydrates back into your muscle.
And is there a knock-on effect? Imagine if you sort of go all morning out training, you have a good sized lunch with the greater sort of role of carbohydrate. It's very common 2 or 3 hours later, there's no way that single food was getting close to replenishing,
Right.
stored. So then is there a later snack that you go?
Yeah.
You go and so it's okay, it's great to snack. It's okay to snack, and maybe that snack might be bigger. Is that almost a
Right.
mini meal?
Yeah, well, and especially too with the training like that, where you're not really getting your morning snack that you probably would have gotten if it was a
That's
shorter
true,
training
yeah.
session, right? So you do need to make up for that in a sense, post a long session like that, so you can recover properly. So frequent refeedings, essentially, of protein, carbohydrates, and those meals following that first meal can start to add in some fats, start to add in some fresh vegetables, things like that.
On the flip side, tangentially a little bit, but I think is interesting is in practice is one of the cues when athletes have maybe got it wrong is if they're hitting their evening meal and they're desperate for starchy carbohydrates, or they go to bed at night and they're reaching for the cookies, reaching for the ice cream. Is that a clear signal that maybe you didn't consume enough calories post-workout?
Right. Yeah, and that's not the right time to consume those things,
Yeah.
right? Really ever. But then at that time in particular is going to affect our sleep. It's going to affect our recovery while we're sleeping. So yeah, you should have recovered properly in a way where you don't need something like that and you're not having those cravings later in the evening.
Okay, so super. Let's go to the other end of the scale.
Okay.
At the same time, you've got a 40-minute easy run, a 60-minute swim. So these are two workouts that during the session, you just don't need calories.
Right.
How do we refuel for that? Because it's still important to refuel, isn't
Absolutely. Yeah. And something like that, especially too, if you did it in the morning, going straight into your breakfast, again, you don't need as much carbohydrates as you would have consumed post your Ironman simulation, right? But again, still replenishing the glycogen that was broken down and the proteins too. So sticking in that 20 to 30 grams of protein range and recovering, with those carbohydrates, depending on your composition, your goals, all of that stuff to replenish the glycogen you broke down.
I see this happening a lot, and that's following a workout. The go-to for many athletes is shakes. And I'll wrap up under there a homemade shake with some protein powder and a bunch of fruits in there, or something that's grabbed off the shelf, such as chocolate milk, or an engineered sort of athletic recovery shake. Overused for the most part. What's the use of them? When is it appropriate for those? It's not every single workout, that's for sure, is it?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a convenience thing why they're used most often. And I understand that people are busy. If you're in a pinch, it's better to fuel with something than nothing.
Sure.
So if you can get in something that's a whey isolate based, if you can tolerate dairy, ideally from New Zealand or Canada, they have stricter policies on their processing of the dairy.
Oh, interesting.
Little cleaner product than we can get here in the U.S. And then pairing, ideally, too, one that's low in carbohydrates, so you can control the carbohydrate content that's being added to it as well.
Okay.
And you can pair that with something like rice milk. You could eat a banana on the side, depending on how much carbs you really need to recover from that session.
What do you need to look out for if you're all you can do is go into a shop. You've got a Whole Foods there, you've got a Safeways there, and you say, I need to get something, and I can run in and grab it. I'm not going to grab real food. I'm going to grab a drink. I'm driving down to work. What are the things to look out for or potentially avoid?
Definitely avoiding those fake sugars. So those sucralose, the aspartame, xylitol, maltitol, all of those things that could potentially be added to those shakes, and looking for something that's going to, in terms of carbohydrates that you're really looking for carbohydrates that are dominant in glucose as opposed to fructose. So higher fructose things are going to be things like agave, honey. Your fruits are much higher, so dried fruits, things like that you want to hold off on and kind of opt for things like rice milk, like I mentioned. Bananas are okay, dates are okay, in moderation. Potatoes of sorts, obviously that's not a shake, but you could get a pureed, kind of baby food sweet potato packet.
Okay.
I know they have those at Whole Foods. And then
I was wondering where you were going there, by the way. It's like liquefied potato. It's not my favorite shake, but the baby food makes sense.
It is a good thing to go for in terms of your recovery and helping with your recovery. And then, if you can grab like a Greek yogurt or something like that from the refrigerator section, that's going to be a good protein source.
Which those are really available. And you can actually get those in even some of the kids' Greek yogurts that you can actually get in squeezy tubes and things like that are really valuable. And antioxidants or
Yeah.
antioxidants,
Great
as
question.
you Americans would say, because there was a big movement of this is going to remove free radical damage and blah 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 blah. But a lot of the research is showing
Right.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
They're great, but don't do it post workout.
Right. Yeah, and that's absolutely true. Yeah, the studies done recently looked at that thinking that they were going to improve the athlete's performance. And in reality, it did the opposite. They weren't able to adapt and improve to their aerobic training that they were stressing their body tissues too. So, pushing off those antioxidants, in that first meal, hopefully for, a couple hours at least post training. So things like dark berries, your dark leafy greens. I know a lot of athletes like to throw, a shake together and put some spinach or something like that in there, thinking it's a good idea. And it would be if it wasn't right after training. So
Sure.
let's push the leafy greens and the spinach and the berries and things like that till a little later.
Two things that really come out of so firstly, to reiterate what you said, berries, kale, spinach, great to have. Move it to the
Yes.
other part.
Yeah.
In some ways similar to fat, that we talked about
exactly.
earlier, moving the fat. It's a big role to play, but make sure you do it at the right time. And then the second thing that the studies showing is interrupting the recovery process. And that actually goes across a lot of studies that they're finding with things like cold therapy, massage post exercise, all of the things that sort of compression and things like that, inhibiting the adaptation process that
Right.
comes. Recovery needs to be relatively natural.
Yeah.
And so don't interfere with it with things like antioxidants, because it's actually going to limit the
Right.
adaptations from the stress of training that you're looking to get.
Yeah.
So thank you. That's super. So some really basic habits around fueling, some rules of thumb. And of course, we know it's absolutely critical to your success. So watch, listen, but most importantly, implement. Take care.